Yama. Hello everybody. My name's Rebecca Bateman and I'm the Director of Indigenous Engagement here at the National Library. I've been invited to acknowledge the country that we're on tonight, which is my very great privilege to. Also as a visitor to this country, I'm a Whalan and Gamilaroi woman from the northwest of New South Wales, so this is also not my country, but I have been here for a very long time and continually grateful to be able to walk and live and play and work on this beautiful, beautiful country. So I pay my respects to the elders of this country who have been taking very great care of this country for many, many years, to the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people who continue to take very great care of this country so that we can all be on it and enjoy it and pay our respects to it. Here at the library, I also always extend my acknowledgement to the many, many communities and mobs that are represented in the collections that we are very privileged to be a custodian of here at the National Library. And I would also like to extend that to all of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander storytellers that we have with us here tonight, and to your elders and old people for bringing you all here. Have a wonderful night, and yeah, my deepest respects.
Good evening, everyone. The Honourable Tony Burke, MP, honoured guests and viewers from afar. We're gathered here in the Grand Theatre of the National Library of Australia for the much anticipated 2023 Prime Minister's Literary Awards. I'm your host, Benjamin Law, delighted to be here tonight to shine a spotlight on our homegrown literary talent. To commence, we acknowledge and thank the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, the traditional custodians of the land we meet on today, and express gratitude to Rebecca Bateman for that generous acknowledgement. It's important for me to set a scene here before we continue. We received 643 entries for this year's awards. Yes. And only some remain. No, that is a vast number of books. There is a group of people who had the substantial task of working through them all, and that's our esteemed judges. So judges, yes, you with the very specific purple lanyards, would you please be, if you're able to, upstanding actually? Come on, don't be shy. Yes. Thank you so much. I've been a judge of awards before, and it takes considerable care and expertise, and all of you have provided that to lead us up to this point tonight. Of that substantial number of entries, there are some whose work shone so brightly from the page that they were selected to be shortlisted for these awards. These people, many of whom are here with us tonight, have established their presence in the Australian literary canon, and we are delighted to celebrate that achievement tonight. Let's keep that energy high, folks. For everyone here in the room with me, please make sure your mobile devices are turned off or set to silent. And to our winners, when your name is called, please come forward promptly, that's in the script, exchange a handshake with the Minister, give your acceptance words on the microphone, and then take a photograph over here before you take your seat again. Those joining us from home are getting a tiny peek inside the National Library's theatre, a beacon of Australian heritage and keeper of our collective written word. Thank you to the National Library for hosting us tonight, and for folks at home, we encourage you to come and visit this landmark in our cultural history. Tonight's festivities honour achievements across children's literature, young adult literature, Australian history, poetry, non-fiction and fiction. The diversity of voices and cultural perspectives within these categories reflects the rich and varied nature of life in this country. And speaking of rich, let's talk prizes. The accolade for each winner tonight is more than just a title or the treasured recognition of esteemed peers, significant rewards as they are. It is also a substantial monetary award. Each winner will take home $80,000 tax-free. I feel like feel like RuPaul in Drag Race. $80,000. Additionally, each shortlisted candidate receives $5,000 in recognition of their outstanding contribution to Australia's literary narrative. Now, they've said here in my notes that I'm now allowed to freestyle about my take on the qualities of the Australian literary landscape in 2023, and this is the part where I really encourage you not to tweet or X about it. No. Look, I have worked in a bookshop for 5 years at Avid Reader in West End, and I worked there with Anna Crean, actually, one of the judges here. Independent bookshops support them. And I named them because I do remember that when I was shelving the bookshelves, I would sometimes ignore the Australian literary section because I just felt, it's not for me. But in those 5 years, I noticed the shift from sheep and cattle and stations to more diverse representations of Australian life. I saw more First Nations works. I saw people of colour. I saw queer people represented in those shelves, and I think tonight's list is a reflection and a testament to how broad, diverse, deep and rich Australian literature has become and has always been. Now it's getting a platform. So this is a narrative that is broad-ranging, exploring class, identity, race, and the complications of thoughtful living in a seemingly unmanageable world, from profound tributes to Gurindji country to elegiac contemplation of humble creatures, from the Great Barrier Reef to a farm just a short drive from this room. In their abundant varieties, these stories capture the heart of what it means to be Australian. Now, before we get into the juicy, and by that I mean financial, end of proceedings, would you please make welcome to the stage CEO of Creative Australia, Adrian Collette.
Thank you, Benjamin. It's just wonderful to have your wit and wisdom play across this. Thank you so much. And good evening, esteemed guests, colleagues, and above all, our wonderful authors. It's so good to see you all here. And it's wonderful to be on Ngunnawal and Ngambri country. And I pay my respects to elders, past and present, and to all my wonderful First Nations colleagues at Creative Australia. I want to acknowledge the Honourable Tony Burke, Minister for the Arts, and thank him for everything he is doing to energise the creative life of this country. To our Special Envoy for the Arts, Susan Templeman, thank you for your tireless advocacy of all we do. To Mr Graham Perrott, MP, to the Honourable Dr Brett Mason, Chair of the National Library of Australia, to Marie-Louise Ayres, thank you for welcoming us and hosting us, Marie-Louise. I think you've been Director General here since 2017 and with the library for over 20 years. That is a huge contribution and I congratulate you on it. And Dr Stephen Arnott, Deputy Secretary of the Creative Economy and the Arts, and colleagues from the Office for the Arts with whom we work so closely. On October 26th, we announced the shortlist for the 2023 Prime Minister's Literary Awards, which celebrate the brilliance and artistry of our nation's writers, illustrators, poets and historians, voices that enrich and inform the cultural narrative of contemporary Australia, a complex narrative of a nation which is very much in the making. Since its inception in 2008, the Prime Minister's Literary Awards have been carefully shepherded by the Office for the Arts. They began in 2008 with awards given for fiction and non-fiction. In 2010, categories were introduced for young adult and children's fiction. In 2012, poetry was added and the Prime Minister's Prize for Australian History. Our thanks are due especially to Kim Brunaro, Aisha Bennett and Kristen Gidney, who have stewarded the PM's awards since their inception. Now, we're thrilled that Creative Australia has been asked to take on their stewardship. On a personal note, as someone who spent many years working in publishing and establishing a list of Australian authors, promoting such recognition of Australian writing means a great deal to me. Personal note. As I hope you'll see from tonight's event, the Creative Australia team takes our new responsibility very much to heart, and I want to thank our Head of Literature, Winona Byrne, to Jo Simpson, Dale... That applause would mean a lot to Winona and to us, to Dale Hannarup and many, many other people at Creative Australia who've embraced this so warmly. I want to thank our excellence of judges. I don't know what the collective noun is for judges, but it is no small thing to take responsibility for judging these awards, and they have done so with expert care and diligence. Guided by our National Cultural Policy, Revive, we are well into establishing Creative Australia, and our sights are set firmly on the launch of Writers Australia in 2025. Writers Australia will champion, nurture, invest in and amplify the work of Australian writers as never before. Our new cultural policy compels it. A place for every story, a story for every place. The telling of Australian stories is fundamental to our creative and cultural future, or, as Charlotte Wood said in her submission to the National Cultural Policy, writers are crucial primary producers of Australian culture. Our books are adapted for screen and film and stage and opera. We write fiction and screenplays, stage plays and short stories, poetry, novels and journalism. Many thanks to our Prime Minister, the Honourable Anthony Albanese. Though he could not join us tonight, his appreciation for Australian writing is palpable. In fact, we were asked to dispatch copies of many of our shortlisted books to keep him company on his current overseas travels. And now please welcome the person who led the development of our National Cultural Policy and the imminent establishment of Writers Australia as Australia's Minister for the Arts, the Honourable Tony Burke.
Thanks very much, Adrian, for that warm welcome. And I have to say there is no cultural policy without Creative Australia, and the work that's being done is just phenomenal. So thank you for the way that you and your organisation are leading that. Really appreciate it. To Rebecca Bateman, thank you for doing the acknowledgement of country. I do want to say I've just been to an event at the Archives, and we keep going to events. I think we go to so many that it often gets lost on people, that we keep being told welcome. And you think of all the things that could be said, all the different things that could be said, and the generosity that the word we keep hearing is welcome. For everything that's happened in different ways, I'm still very proud to be part of a government that will continue to lead towards a nation that can offer in every way that same level of generosity in return. I didn't realise Benjamin was going to be doing the MC tonight. Really happy about that. Benjamin wrote an article some years ago that really spoke to me about him as a school student just by fluke discovering the world of live theatre. And my journey was similar, although it ended up with a careers advisor lying to me and telling me there were no courses to be a theatre director, which I discovered was a lie 30 years later when I was Arts Minister and did a function at NIDA and saw the course. But, you know, I'm over it. I found a way to be relevant anyway. For hosting us, Brett Mason, Dr. Brett Mason as chair, and Marie-Louise Ayres, thank you so much. Of all the places in Australia that this could be held, to hold it in the National Library really means a lot. And obviously to Stephen Arnott, who heads up the work for this portfolio in my department. We've changed how these awards occur. So I'll say a bit about the National Cultural Policy, but this is the first time they're being done differently. The Prime Minister's Literary Awards started when Kevin Rudd became Prime Minister, and they always had one oddity about them that I remember dealing with when I was first Julia Gillard's and then at the very end Kevin Rudd's Arts Minister, which was the judges would do all their work, but then the Prime Minister had to sign off on every award without necessarily having read the work and certainly not having gone into the discussions of the judges, which effectively meant we got all the blame. And so now you've got judges who, as shortlisted people, you can all give them a round of applause now. But by the end of the night, different ones of you will have different levels of adulation for the judges. But we've been happy to work on the basis that as a government now, for the fact that the awards are here, we have a direct role. For whoever wins, we get neither credit nor blame. The cultural policy is important for what it says, but also important just because it exists. Because it's odd to have an election promise that just says we will have a policy with this title without really saying what it'll be. But when we lost office, the same thing happened when Paul Keating lost office. It wasn't that the cultural policy was changed to something more conservative, it was simply abolished and replaced with nothing. And I wanted to make sure that we could get the sense of cultural policy so entrenched that at whatever point we're no longer in office, which I hope is a long, long way away, but it's just accepted this is part of what Australia does. And that's why we moved so quickly with Revive. I should say I was on the phone to the Prime Minister just before I came here. He called to check how Parliament was going. It's been a rather big day for us, but he does wish his best to all of you. So at the end of the conference, I told him I was going to be here. I told him I would say that, and then I told him to get some sleep because it's a very different hour of the day where he is now. The cultural policy deals with 5 different pillars. First Nations first, a place for every story, the centrality of the artist, having strong cultural infrastructure, and making sure that we engage with the audience. Now, in doing all of that, the first 2 pillars acknowledge where the stories originate. Stories that have lived here from the first sunrise have to, and their storytellers drawing on that tradition, have to be the first pillar and foundation of all storytelling in Australia. Then we have to acknowledge, no matter where you are, no matter what your story is, in Australia and in our cultural policy, there should be there should be a place for every story, because there is indeed a story for every place. When we talk about the artist, well, that's you. And both judges and nominees alike, you're all artists. You're all storytellers, and storytellers in a fascinating world. Yeah, almost every other art form in some way presents the work to us in terms of other senses, what we see or what we hear. In some way the work is being presented before us on a canvas, on a stage, however it might be. But through your genius with words, we see an entire picture in our minds, which allows, because that's the art form, for you to take us into what people are thinking and feeling in a direct way that every other art form reaches into, but no art form has that direct access that you have. When we talk about strong cultural infrastructure, these awards are part of it. And may these awards forever go on, and may the work continue from yourselves to enrich our lives, and hopefully these awards also provide a platform that your work reaches that little bit further than it otherwise would have. Because that allows that 5th pillar of the engaging with the audience. And I've been working my way through the work. I've skimmed everything, and I've been reading out loud from the poetry each day. This morning it was another work from Sarah Holland-Batts' The Jaguar, it's great. And in that work, I have to say, as with the genius of true artistry, every time I read out loud a work from The Jaguar, I start with an inkling and a better understanding of Sarah's relationship with her own father, and then by the time I've got to the end, I'm just hearing the memory of my own. And the way that your work and whatever story you tell, when it reaches the audience, goes beyond your story and intersects with our own lives is the way that your work doesn't just help us to see whatever the story is that you're telling. It also gives us a deeper insight into ourselves than we had before we started. There are many different genres. I've referred to poetry, and obviously I've had a love of poetry for a very long time, and I love the concept of it being read out loud, even though I normally kick everyone out of the office before I do it. Unless it's my acronym rule. I hate acronyms. And I've still got this rule, which I haven't reactivated this term, but this morning someone used an acronym and I thought it might come back, which is where whoever uses the third acronym in any meeting has to read a poem to the group. I can't lose. Hate acronyms, love poetry. If I start with the works of fiction, I'm not going to go through them all, but just to give you a tiny little glimpse. One of the things that I think we still haven't captured in the cultural policy, there are all forms of representation we've touched on, and all forms of underrepresented stories that need to be better told. We still haven't got there on class. And the work which I've just started in the last couple of days reading Other People's Houses, the concept of someone's interaction whose job and living is to clean, is a window of a story that too often is not told, and sometimes is simply the reference to, historically, the comic character, telling those stories of class, and for that to be among the nominees today, I really think is important. And similarly, for George Haddad's work, Losing Face, the knowledge that I have in my part of Sydney of how much has changed. I live in Punchbowl. Growing up, there would not have been to mind. Well, the only works that were set in my part of Sydney were They're a Weird Mob, which were there as humorous stories about my neighbours in my part of Sydney, told by someone called John O'Grady, who didn't live in my part of Sydney, and using a pseudonym to allegedly make it funnier. The non-fiction section, I think the classic example of this concept of it, making sure we reach every story, is that one of the non-fiction works intersects with Hong Kong. A reminder that some people are struggling with at the moment, with conflicts that are happening in particular in the Middle East, that it is right and proper that people will grieve and people will have a direct relationship with the country of their heritage and the land of their heritage. We should accept that and welcome that and respect that and be willing, because that's part of the Australian story, to grieve together, to understand together, and when a work like Indelible City is written, to know that that gives us an Australian window into better understanding other stories that we may have otherwise only understood through the news. But similarly, the First Nations stories being told, Black Lives, White Law. I sit around a cabinet table where we are working through the Closing the Gap targets. To have a non-fiction work going into so much depth that goes specifically to what we call the justice target doesn't just become a work to make people think. It becomes a work which is a reform project in itself. And similarly, unmasking Angus Downs, the concept of someone living in the city and suddenly being told you've got to go work on the family farm. These stories will all transport us to different places, but it transported me to Kevin Rudd ringing up and saying, I know you live in Roselands in Sydney at that time, I wasn't in Punchbowl, but you're going to be Minister for Agriculture. And thinking if someone, there are people who engage in agriculture in my part of Sydney, but the police are usually called in. I also just want to mention young adult fiction. The concept of different stories, ask no questions, acknowledging that in a nation where so many people now have a parent who was born overseas or they were themselves, it's not simply for the countries where you have huge immigrant populations. To have that interaction with someone's ancestry that's from Poland is really important. Every story I want to find a way of being told. And the upwelling in young adult fiction, wow. The concept of being able to offer to young readers a story that interacts but is not a fantasy genre in the sense that it's moving into a dreaming story and back. Young people who read that will change their concept of the country they live in forever. These works are important. And finally, on children's literature, and I didn't skim those, I have read all of those. And I just want to refer to two. And I don't know who's winning, so none of this is an indication of anything. The first one from Randa Abdel Fattah. To have nominated a children's book called 11 Words for Love, about the 11 Arabic words told through a Palestinian family. It's I don't want any more little kids in my family. Ours are about to leave home. We've got one left. That's all fine. But I tell you, if they were still that age, I'd be reading it to them every day. There'll be a lot of copies of that one that I give over the years. The other one that I just think is really conceptually fascinating is My Strange Shrinking Parents. Because what Zeno Sauter has done there is the child will hear a slightly different story to what the parent reading it out loud will hear. And the child will hear a story of, oh, that's weird, the parents kept getting smaller. And the parent will hear a story of how Australia, when we're not welcoming, can be cruel and can cause people to feel diminished. The wonder of what literature can do is all there. Now, when we get to the awards bit, there's just a tiny change. No one should feel any sympathy because I was actually sick about 5 or 6 weeks ago, but the fatigue has not left me. So Susan Templeman's actually going to do who's the arts envoy, is going to do all the awards bit. And if for some reason that I don't understand you want to have a photo with me too, I'll pop up, but I won't stay up because I'm at the natural limit of my speaking time at the moment works in your favour because the fatigue says it's time for me to be seated. But can I just conclude with this? The greatest privilege I get as Arts Minister is not in the Parliament, it's not in the Cabinet room, and it's not even in terms of policy. The greatest privilege, if I can explain conceptually for me, I'll explain it in terms of the Paul McCartney concert the other night, where I was there with one of my daughters. When you buy tickets, it's sort of, officially it's the mosh, but when you're watching an 81-year-old, I don't think it's really a mosh. But the moment he came out on stage and I applauded, I felt, I've got my money's worth now. Because it wasn't that I wanted to see him, I just wanted a chance to say thank you and to applaud in his presence. And the show that followed was a bonus. The greatest honour I get as Arts Minister is to talk to the creators of the nation on behalf of Australia and just say thank you for what you do. With policy, we try to change people's lives and change people's hearts too. And if we get there, it happens over years. You do it with every syllable. You reach people, you take them to places, and every time someone knows the experience of another, their depth of understanding of themselves, of life itself, of their neighbours, and the opportunity for the rest of the world to know us deepens. What you do is precious. What you do is nation building. What you do earns the title of being Australia's essential workers. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much, Minister Burke, for your words and for your work folks, an arts minister who not only reads poetry, but takes poetry into the workplace. That is a vibe, and it's a good one. Ladies, gentlemen, non-conforming legends, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce the Children's Literature category. This year's entries impressed the judges with their ingenuity and boldness, with a short list of titles acknowledged as exceptionally courageous, compelling, and well-crafted. Each stands alone as a work of excellence while also redefining the boundaries of Australian children's literature, and each tackles pressing narratives in new and unexpected ways, skillfully integrating language and imagery to create compelling characters and stories. These beautifully written and highly entertaining stories are sure to be read by many times over by kids and their carers, becoming part of the narratives of their lives. And the shortlist is
Children's Literature. 11 Words for Love by Randa Abdel Fattah and Maxine Beniba Clark. A gentle, profound story for children in English and Arabic that explores 11 different forms of love, from Alwood, sunshine warm friendship, to Al Hanan, marshmallow heart tender. Open Your Heart to Country by Jasmine Seymour. An ode to the ancient strength and beauty of country, told in English and Darug. As the author explains, by reading the Darug words told with their own English translations, you will hear this story with Darug ears. The Dungir Brothers and the Caring Song of the Whale by Auntie Shah Smith with Yandara. A beautifully written and illustrated dreaming narrative that invites readers into an ancient story and the presence of the land and peoples who give the story life and meaning. My Strange Shrinking Parents by Zeno Sorda. A migrant child is awed and frustrated by his parents' sacrifices. In this unique and uncanny telling of a familiar story, the narrator's parents are required to give up a part of themselves, literally. Zadie Ma and the Dog Who Chased the Moon by Gabrielle Wong. An extraordinary novel about how imagination can empower people and the profound intergenerational strength of story itself and the way in which it can change how we see ourselves and others.
And I get to do the really fun bit. Thank you, Minister. The winner of the Children's Literature Prize is Jasmine Seymour for Open Your Heart to Country. Bujurina Junila, Danai Dalang Darug. Hello, it's good to see you all. My language is Darug, and this book, I'm so shocked that it has won, because I didn't think anyone understood the story. Because this book is about language revitalisation in Australia, and it's a message of hope to my language community who is doing the hard work of bringing back our language. And it was intended as a message of hope for all those communities who are doing the hard work of trying to bring back their languages. So thank you to Magabala for having the bravery to publish these sorts of stories. And thank you to my language community, the Darug language community, for the hard work they're doing, bringing back our language. And thank you to my beautiful family. Thank you, everyone.
Congratulations, Jasmine. Turning our attention to the young adult category, we honour the stories that bridge the gap between childhood and adulthood, tales that speak with authenticity to the trials and triumphs of the young. The judges identified a shortlist of 5 standouts, so different in form and content that taken together, they demonstrate the spectrum of young adult creative talent in this country. Each title brings something unique to the Australian landscape of published young adult fiction, whether it be by way of form or genre, from a work of memoir in free verse to a First Nations fantasy introducing Indigenous lore, culture and language to a mainstream readership, to genre-defying work spanning changes in time frame and form, or a contemporary work of dazzling clarity, rage and literary finesse. Each title demonstrates the literary virtuosity that critics often claim is missing from books of this age group. And the shortlist is
Young Adult. Ask No Questions by Eva Collins. This affecting debut free verse memoir is a wonderful introduction to a period of post-war Australian history, charting a family's journey from Poland to Australia during the Cold War. What We All Saw by Mike Lucas. A story with beautifully drawn characters that moves fluidly through many genres, this debut novel tells a dark, exciting, complex tale of teens grappling with domestic abuse and violence. Sugar by Carly Nugent. An exquisitely written debut novel, themes of living with disability and chronic illness, grief and poverty are threaded through a work of dazzling clarity and finesse. The Upwelling by Listra Rose. A compelling breath of fresh air in Australian literature and genre writing, this near-apocalypse fantasy proudly employs Yugambeh language in the story of teen surfer Kira and the alternative world she discovers. The Greatest Thing by Sarah Winifred Searle. A profound exploration of the value of art in helping us negotiate the world, this tender coming-of-age novel employs precise, well-considered dialogue and artwork to tell the story of grade 10 student Wynne.
And the winner, Young Adult Literature, is Sarah Winifred Searle for The Greatest Thing.
First, I'll acknowledge that The Greatest Thing is set in the Dawnland, home of the Wabanaki Confederacy where I grew up. I made the book in Borlu, on unceded Whadjuk Noongar country. I'd like to thank my team at Macmillan and Allen and Unwin for making this my first book to be published where I actually live. It's an honor to share tonight with all the writers here and to share this category of previous years with some of the very best in comics. Thanks to the government, judges, and Creative Australia for this life-changing gift. And thanks for the privilege of actually living here, getting to live here. I wouldn't be the writer I am now without public health care, the richer, slower lifestyle I've found in WA, or its incredible comics community who've made it home. The joy I've felt for this award has been nearly unbelievable, and it's buoyed me through some of the most stressful news cycles of my life, including the Lewiston shooting in my home state, high-stakes votes in both my countries, and the violence in Palestine. I have 60 seconds to articulate how I feel like one of the luckiest people in the world, while at the same time, it feels like the whole world is on fire. I don't know how to separate these things. I can't. But last night, my husband reminded me that this book is about being able to admit you're scared, even if you don't have answers. So I'll just say that current events, this award included, have been an opportunity to reflect on my privilege and responsibility as an author and my place in the world as a human being. I'm scared, I'm a mess, but I'm alive. And for tonight, I am just so happy to be here. Thank you.
Congratulations, Sarah Winifred. Now tonight, as we delve into the Australian history category of the Prime Minister's Literary Awards, we embark on an evocative journey through time. This year, our shortlisted storytellers explore the lives of lawmakers, law breakers, and law enforcers, the early colonisers and First Nations women and their families that form our cultural heritage. Each of these works combines exemplary scholarship with passion and purpose. They are books that stretch the boundaries of the discipline, shake up what we think we know about the history, and revisit Australia's past so we might begin to reimagine its future. And the shortlist is...
Australian history. Elizabeth and John, the MacArthurs of Elizabeth Farm by Alan Atkinson. This expansive, deliberative, leisurely and absorbing dual biography gives us John and Elizabeth MacArthur as they saw themselves, in a narrative that effortlessly combines intimacy with breadth. Saving the Reef by Rowan Lloyd. This important environmental history of the Great Barrier Reef demonstrates that people make history by the actions they take and the decisions they make, and offers hope for future collective actions for conservation and change. Black Lives, White Law by Russell Marks. This passionate, timely book shines a critical light on First Nations incarceration rates in Australia, bringing history into the present with a sense of urgency and purpose. Unmaking Angus Downs by Shannon Palmer. Relating the history of a place layered with varied human experience, colonising stories of pastoralism and tourism sit alongside Angangu life stories and journeys, and how a cattle station was transformed into country. Justice in Kelly Country by Lachlan Strawn. This deft, assured and moving account offers a nuanced elaboration of time, place and protagonists, giving insight into the complex motivations, constraints and opportunities of a broadcast of colonial characters.
And the winner of the Australian History Award is Shannon Palmer for Unmaking Angus Downs.
Thank you. My heart feels like it's about to burst out of my chest. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land that we're gathered on this evening, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I'm honoured and deeply grateful that Unmaking Angus Downs has been recognised in this way. I'd like to thank the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, the Minister for Arts, Tony Burke, and Creative Australia for the work that this award does in recognising research and writing that enhances our understanding of Australia's past and present. I'd also like to say thank you to the judges for their deep reading and careful consideration of the work, and also to congratulate my fellow shortlisted authors on having their significant contributions to Australian history recognised in this way. It's truly an honour to be in the company of such an incredible group of historians and writers this evening. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to my publisher, Melbourne University Press, for believing in Unmaking Angus Downs and facilitating the circulation of this important story of place. We can't understand a place like Angus Downs without the stories of the people who live there, and I am most indebted to and feel a deep sense of gratitude to Anangu and Chuki Chukanko Pumpjack and Sandra Armstrong. Angus Downs is their place, and it's their stories that are the beating heart of this book. When I met them, Chuki and Sandra were on a mission to have their knowledge recorded, and in choosing to work with me, they were keenly aware that others might end up reading their stories. And I have no doubt that if they were still with us here on this earthly plane today, that they would be extremely proud and feel the deepest sense of satisfaction to see their lives and their experience recognised in this way. And I dedicate this award to them. Thank you.
Congratulations, Shannon. In the realm of poetry, we find the essence of expression distilled to its purest form. And this year's shortlist serves as a reminder of just how rich and accomplished this community of writers is and how powerfully poetry speaks into our contemporary moment in many diverse ways. Their work stands as a testament to the enduring power of poetry to move, to provoke, and to heal. And the shortlist is
Poetry. Clean by Scott Patrick Mitchell. These captivating poems map the trauma-haunted terrain of addiction and recovery with fearless experimentation and striking compassion, giving the reader a visceral sense of the humanity behind the headlines of the methamphetamine crisis. Harvest Lingo by Lionel Fogarty. Across themes of love and country, domestic and international politics, the personal and interpersonal, this collection interrogates all facets of life as observed and experienced by an Indigenous elder and a lifelong activist. At the Altar of Touch by Gavin Yuan Gao. Intensely lyrical, intimate and expansive, this collection of poems deploys striking imagery and layered metaphor to find a path through suffering towards connection and belonging. The Jaguar by Sarah Holland Batt. A book of intensely moving poems which explore grief, loss, change and memory in transformative ways, the poet's metaphorical imagination and control of language ensure that her poems are shapely, richly evocative and affecting. Exactly As I Am by Ray White. An impressive and necessary work, this book will help to break down barriers and prejudices faced by transgender people. Essentially, it is a book of love and empowerment.
And the winner of this year's Poetry Award is Gavin Yuan Gao for At the Altar of Touch.
I'm incredibly honoured to be receiving this award tonight. First, I want to pay my respect to the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people on whose lands we're standing tonight. I'm deeply grateful to Creative Australia and to the three judges for their confidence in my work. My sincerest thanks to my publisher, the University of Queensland Press, and especially Aviva Tarfield, and also to my editor and mentor, Felicity Plunkett, for their unwavering support. Last but not least, I want to thank poetry. I came to this country as a 14-year-old with just a suitcase and barely spoke a word of English. I was terribly lonely and helpless. It was poetry that kept me alive. Thank you.
Congratulations, Gavin. We're going to move on to my first love now, the non-fiction category, where 5 exceptional titles were selected from an impressive range of high-quality submissions. These works emphasise truth-telling in addressing Australia's colonial history, as well as the impacts of colonialism on Hong Kong. Readers are invited to contemplate connection to country, the pressing concerns of the climate crisis, and the value of a life lived in writing. These titles constitute a revelation and a reckoning, identifying the urgent challenges of our time, inherited family trauma, the looming realities of mass extinction, the moral imperative of practical reconciliation. Each demonstrates a way forward in their analysis. And the shortlist is
Non-fiction. We Come With This Place by Deborah Dank. This shatteringly beautiful memoir insists on a powerful sovereignty of voice, bringing the reader to negotiate their relationship to Gudangji country across the injustice of the past to our colonial present. Indelible City, Dispossession and Defiance in Hong Kong by Louisa Lim. This evocative and multi-layered picture of Hong Kong reveals something irrepressibly distinctive about Hong Kong and its people, despite the grand incongruous narratives of its overseers. Shirley Hazard, A Writing Life by Brigitte Olubas. This literary biography is both compelling and light in touch. Easy to read and enriched by thorough research, the work offers an intimate sense of Hazard across the scope of her life. A World in a Shell, Snail Stories for a Time of Extinctions, Tom Van Duren. At a time when we are beginning to face the realities of mass extinction, this sensitive work calls to attention the importance of recognising the specificity of each loss. My Father and Other Animals by Sam Vincent. A highly readable account of returning to the family farm to help an ageing father, this seemingly light-hearted book probes deeply into some of the biggest issues of our time.
And the winner of the non-fiction award is Sam Vincent, My Father and Other Animals.
Writing, like farming, is a famously well-paid profession, so to win this award feels like a very big day at the sale yards indeed. This is a lovely surprise and a great honour. I'd like to thank my publisher, Black Ink, my parents, Jane and David Vincent, and my partner, Lauren Carroll Harris, and I'd like to congratulate all the other shortlisted authors. Ben mentioned that he wasn't very interested in books about cattle and sheep. And I've written that ahistoric aberration, but I hope my book is about other stuff as well. I really hope that it changes perceptions in what is the most urbanised country in the world about what Australian farmers can be and can do ecologically, socially and culturally, and especially given the recent referendum result. I hope this book serves as a small example of what can be achieved when non-Indigenous farmers listen to traditional owners and work together to protect cultural heritage on private agricultural land. Thank you.
Congratulations, Sam, and fine, you've converted me. To the fiction category now, where the shortlisted works invite us to look outward rather than inward. Collectively, the works indicate an emerging and informed confidence in contemporary Australian writing, a different narrative from that of the accepted traditional Australia. From the natural and cultivated beauty of Japan to the hidden labour at the underside of our class system, these writers interrogate different lives with fresh and sustained perspectives. Whether exploring the nature of love, the intergenerational perspectives on moral issues in multicultural Australia, or reimagining the past with clarity, beauty, and courage, these are powerful and engrossing works that speak to our contemporary concerns. And the shortlist is
Fiction. Cold Enough for Snow by Jessica Au. Relating a short holiday spent together in Japan by a mother and daughter, this is a novel of remarkable grace, signalling a new direction in Australian literature with a flow and reach that is without boundaries. Losing Face by George Haddad. Racial profiling, class consciousness, casual misogyny, queerness, love and family loyalty. These big topics are afforded appropriate gravity in this sharply funny story of a Western Sydney 19-year-old. The Lovers by Yumna Kassab. A formerly experimental work that gestures to, then warps the conventions of tragedy, romance and folklore. With structural inventiveness, The Lovers enlivens and explodes the time-honoured story of romance against the odds. The Sun Walks Down by Fiona McFarlane. A luminous retelling of the story of the lost child in the Australian landscape, this striking work demonstrates the storyteller's capacity to imagine the past with clarity, beauty and courage. Other Houses by Paddy O'Reilly. Written in prose that sings on the page with joy and lament, this book is a tribute to the pragmatism of those who must take the unprincipled stand and do what is needed to survive.
And the winner of the Fiction Award for 2023 is Jessica Au for Cold Enough for Snow.
There are a lot of people to thank tonight in a very short amount of time, and I know we're at the tail end of the evening, so I'm just going to race through a few names. Firstly, George, Fiona, Patty and Yumna, thank you for your incredible works and for the profound honour of being on the shortlist with you tonight. I'd like to thank my agent Claire Forster for her steady hand, and of course Ollie and my mother Celia for more than I can say here. But tonight I would really like to take the time to thank two people in particular, Ivor Indig and Nick Tapper, and really everybody at Giramondo. It's been an incredible year, and I'm simply so grateful to have been able to pass it together with you. Prizes like these are always a particular blend of luck and happenstance, and I'm truly grateful for whatever alchemy has allowed me to stand here tonight. But I know for sure that none of it would have been possible without the Nobel Prize, without Giramondo, without your support, and really beyond this instance, without your deep and continued dedication to literature and other writers in this country. So thank you from me, and I'm sure many others also. Lastly, of course, I'd like to thank the judges and everybody at Creative Australia for this really rare and special night. Thank you.
Congratulations, Jessica. I loved your book. Friends, as we draw this evening to a close, let's once again give like a thunderous round of applause for all of our winners and shortlistees. I'd also like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the National Library of Australia for hosting us in this magnificent theatre. Tonight has been a celebration of the written word, the power of stories, and the incredible talent that we have right here in Australia. As we leave the theatre of this library, let us carry with us the knowing that we are perpetually walking in the theatre of life, and our lives are made more meaningful in the presence of a talented scribe. I would say that, wouldn't I? Thank you for joining us this evening. It has been a privilege to be your Master of Ceremonies, and on behalf of Creative Australia, good night.